So thank you all for attending. Susan, if you would like to start your presentation, please. Thanks a million.
Thanks. Sorry about that. So good morning, everybody. I'm delighted to be here today. So my name, as Paul mentioned, is Susan Richardson. I'm the program manager here in SEAI for the Sustainable Energy Communities program. And I'm going to give you a quick kind of overview of that and specifically talk through what we have in terms of an energy master plan funding that is appropriate for approved housing bodies. So to start with first, Sustainable Energy Community, it is a community that works together to develop a sustainable energy system for the benefit of that community, whatever it may be. We obviously have a huge number of communities within the program. We've over 1,000 at the moment, and they're hugely varied in terms of, your standard kind of local community group that might be in a rural or an urban setting, or lots of different communities of common interest as well. Looking at, we have universities, approved housing bodies, group water schemes. So really, as it says there, it can be as small as a street or as large as a county or a region. But the core principles prevail. And what we're looking to do is, having a system that's aiming first and foremost to be energy efficient where possible, using renewable energy where feasible, and then looking to smart energy solutions. I mentioned there we've over 1,000 SECs that have registered with the program. We estimate about 70% there or thereabouts are active at one point at any given time. And we have a nice split regionally, quite a balanced approach across the country, with many various different types of communities engaged. How SEAI ourselves, how we run the program is we work with regional coordinators, and then it's basically aligned along local authority, kind of a county structure. So we've 38 county mentors who are active across the country, and these county mentors are really the core of our program. There's 38 of them I mentioned. We have a number of, secondary mentors within some local authority areas. They work with community groups, approved housing bodies, whoever it might be, directly on the ground. They're assigned based on their geographical location, and this group of technical community development experts as well are really tasked with bringing the community groups and the participants in the program across the SEC kind of program journey, which is aligned along learn, plan, and do. So it's quite straightforward. A group or an organization applies to join the SEC program. It's very simple. It's through our website. And then once they're, fill in their application form and are approved, that through that process, they will be assigned a mentor and they can access all of the different learning supports. The plan is the Energy Master Plan phase, which I'll speak to in a bit more detail a little bit later. And then the do phase, which is really implementing the action plan kind of what you've put together through that plan phase. The program, as I mentioned, it's really focused around local mentor supports, and then our grant fund that we have, our 100% funding for this Energy Master Plan, is kind of the core grant that as a program we offer, that allows a community or an organization to look at their energy use and make a sustainable energy roadmap in terms of retrofitting into the future. There's huge benefits of being part of the network in terms of being within that network, and there's peer-to-peer learning opportunities. We host a significant number of events, both local, national, and regional as well. Our own webinars that take place, on various different topics across the year as well. And of course, a big part of what we do is around signposting to the appropriate SEAI grants, as well as other national funding streams that are appropriate for community groups or other organizations as well. Where we interact with approved housing bodies, there are 22 approved housing bodies who are members of the SEC network. The network's been running for over 10 years, and we've had housing bodies within the network, I think, since probably about 2018, 2019. So we have been working with approved housing bodies over quite a number of years. 16 of these HBs have gone on to apply in for Energy Master Plan funding. There is a significant number of those have already completed their Energy Master Plans, and there's a few more that are in the process. And one of the key, I suppose, the key the key areas that we would like to work with in terms of the housing bodies is, is looking at where we can add value and allow approved housing bodies to interact with the program and to avail of this Energy Master Plan funding. So I'll speak to that a little bit more detail now. You can see here it's the second phase on the journey, which I've mentioned. And really it's a straightforward an application again. You put a separate application in that will be worked upon with your SEC mentor. So it's a procurement process that happens between the approved housing body and a consultant, and we fund 100% of the Energy Master Plan in order to have it completed. As I say, it's a retrospective grant with up to 4 milestone payments. The level of grant funding is really dependent on the energy spend within the organisation, within the community group. It kind of graduates from 10 up until €25,000, depending on the size of that community effectively. And that is worked out based on the application form in the Energy Master Plan, which will be kind of brought through the mentor as well, and looks at the overall energy spend and attributes that value then accordingly. Really, the EMP is, it's supposed to be a blueprint for the group in terms of what they want to do from that energy efficiency, renewable energy, smart energy. The guiding principles are presented at the start of this presentation. The scope and the outputs really are to be agreed upon by the Energy Master Plan group, in this case, an approved housing body, alongside the consultant that they've selected as a part of that procurement process. But at its core, it really needs to include a baseline energy performance analysis of the housing stock. Ideally, it will model a range of energy upgrade scenarios across the housing stock. So looking really at sort of shallow, medium, and deep retrofit scenarios. And then one of the really great kind of benefits of it is the kind of modeling or, demonstrating a case study based on specific dwelling cohorts that are within the housing stock, that then ideally will be able to be sort of extrapolated across a larger housing stock area. So just to give a really good idea of where, that the overall housing stock stands today, and what needs to be done to move things forward into a more sustainable housing stock going forward. And this then leads into obviously a home energy upgrade roadmap. So it's an action plan looking to short-term and medium-term objectives, and how they'll be delivered. And that then will also include the next steps to kickstart the implementation of this Energy Master Plan. And one of the core kind of ideals, or one of the core facets of the Sustainable Energy Communities program, is really it needs to be outward looking. So while we are obviously focused inward on what the housing stock is, how it's performing, and how we want it to perform moving forward, it also does need to include stakeholders, and whether that be a broader committee group as well as potentially residents within those groups, and look at behavior change and energy efficiency information, as well as pure kind of retrofit of that housing stock. So it takes that aspect into consideration as well in terms of the next steps. And this is just a quick analysis, or a quick example, I should say, of some of the analysis that would come through the baseline. So utilizing the BER data, it's looking at the age band, the types of dwellings that are included in the study, and then looking at the really kind of important and pertinent information with regard to the energy efficiency of those homes, including fuel types and wall types. That will then allow kind of a baseline, a KPI, to be analysed and looked at, including kind of total energy use, as well as the BER status of the housing stock today, and also emissions associated with that as well. Again, moving on, it would be to the register of opportunities and the strategy moving forward. It looks at those, as I've kind of mentioned, those retrofit scenarios. So in this example here, you've got kind of gold upgrade communal solar PV, for example. So looking at the renewables, and the platinum apartment upgrade. So it's looking at, and that will be worked through with the consultant, and ideally dependent on the kind of the housing stock that is included within the EMP study. And again, those case studies are crucial as well, where it specifically goes through and analyzes maybe one or two or more depending on the requirements, specific homes or type of homes that might be representative of a general housing stock across the approved housing body's housing stock. So it can really just give it a very good overview of the stock. As I say, the baseline shows where it is today, and then these sort of retrofit scenarios kind of will show the potential BER that may be achieved if certain retrofit measures are implemented, and ideally looking at those across, the, like I've said, kind of medium, shallow, medium, and deep retrofit scenarios. And ideally then coming and doing an estimated cost, as well as indicative costs, energy usage savings, as well as indicative CO2 savings, and modeling that out into, a medium and long-term scenarios. So this, really looks to, what you want as a group in terms of the sustainable energy roadmap. It's looking into how you will potentially, target or schedule a retrofit activity over the coming years. Look at renewable energy potential on the homes, and we've many community groups who are also obviously look at sort of community generation projects, whether it's kind of through SRES or larger scale. And that then looks to kind of a project development strategy and how to develop and deliver. And the kind of next steps section of the energy master plan will really delve a little bit more detail into how to move forward and what grants, for example, to be looking at in that respect. I mentioned briefly stakeholder engagement. It definitely, as a part of the SEC program, it's a crucial element. The kind of energy awareness and the future utilization, or the future kind of added value of having a cohort who are living within the homes, who understand energy efficiency, understand how to utilize, the technology that they have within those homes is crucial. And so that always forms part of what we do in terms of maybe a launch of the energy master plan at the end to that relevant cohort, whether it may be tenants, maybe owners, whoever the cohort might be. It is something that, is required, I suppose, as part of the SEC program. It's that outward facing piece of the puzzle, I guess, in terms of delivering those energy efficiency messaging to the users of the homes in particular. And the representation of the outputs of these different types of actions within the energy master plan, depending on the report, it's looking at an improvement on BER. It can also be looking at kind of an investment that's required to get from an average of a C BER, for example, to a B1. So you get, again, that will be worked through with the consultant and the relevant kind of project managers within the AHB and the committee overall. That then really, I suppose, coming towards the end of my section, I'll pass you on to Stephen shortly. What we do then on that do phase of the SEC program is you have your next steps as a part of the EMP. You move on to the do stage, which is really around project implementation. And in SEAI, there's a couple of grant funding streams that Stephen will speak to shortly, which is the Community Energy Grant and the One Stop Shop. And this is where we, in particular, would signpost community groups to, as well as other relevant, non-SEI grant funds that might be more appropriate for community groups. But there's a whole range of supports that are there that you can avail of. But for now, for me, I'll hand over to Stephen. There's the link is there to the SEC program element of our website, and if you have any questions, please just get in touch, and I'll be happy to answer them either after this webinar, or if you want to email me in directly. So I'll just stop sharing my screen there and pass you on
Thanks,
to Stephen.
Susan. While Stephen's getting his presentation ready there, thanks for that. We do have a number of questions coming in, which is great to see. We will be addressing them at the end. So if you have any questions, don't hesitate to type them in into the questions and answers section there as well. And just on Susan's kind of presentation, thanks a million. We're actually going through the process at the moment. And for anyone thinking of doing it, it's really good. It's very supportive. There's someone there to bring you right through the application. So I wouldn't hesitate at all doing it. It's a really good way of looking at your housing stock. Okay, thanks for that, Susan. Stephen, if you're ready to rock and roll, then thanks a
Lovely.
million.
Thanks, Paul. Thanks, Susan. And you can see that there, Paul, can you? Thumbs up. Yeah, Cheers. Come here, Paul, Haley, and the team. Thanks a million for having us on. It's great to get an opportunity to speak to HBs and the wider parties on the grants. Susan, great overview on the early retrofit journey planning, the mentoring structure, the 100% funding for EMP, and the Learn, Plan, Do. It's really good to get those insights. And I'm going to be focusing more on then we've gone through Susan's process in terms of the Learn, Plan, Do, and I'll be focusing more on the do side of it. The bigger picture, guys, just one or two slides, and we're all very familiar of it. The Energy Action Plan, we're trying to reduce our carbon emissions by half based on 2018 by the end of the decade. Okay. To try and put a few numbers on that, we're trying to bring about 500,000 homes to a B2, trying to put 400,000 heat pumps in people's homes to move them away from oil and gas. We all know how volatile the market is now. We want to step out of that and move to a place where we're powering our heating systems from electricity, which is becoming more increasingly renewable. And just to give you a snapshot of where Ireland is as a whole, 50% of our homes are probably at a D rating or lower. So there's a lot to do. In terms of the benefits, so if you're an AHB, be it small, medium, or large, and there's tenants and there's communication with yourselves and the tenants. So upgrading a home increases comfort, warmer, cozier, healthier. There's a huge focus on payback, but there's so much more to upgrading a property. So it's a healthier environment. Obviously, there's energy savings in terms of the bills. The environment, we're doing a bit for the environment, reducing carbon emissions. So it's that headline target of halving it by 2030. And obviously increase the value of your assets. So you have a stock there as an AHB, and suddenly it's up at a B or A rated. So that value of that stock is much better. Tenants and other parties are happier as well. So it's for people to focus on the added benefits of retrofits, sometimes beyond the payback, beyond the financial side, which is very important. Just to give you a bit of an overview on the steps to home energy assessments, and Paul and Padra and myself were having a conversation on this yesterday in terms of, well, how do people get the knowledge and maybe have that experience in terms of procuring contracts and having the confidence to do so. So the key thing with the HB housing stock, and you know they're managing the housing stock, is to assess where you're at and get an idea of where you want to go, what needs to be done in each house. God, how much is this going to cost? Okay, so that's vitally important. So the structures in place to help people do that via a panel of BR assessors or via our one-stop shops to do home energy upgrade assessments, and they can combine stuff and give you that information to make a decision. Then you're insulating your property, so you're keeping the heat in, and then you're adding renewables. Okay, so they're just the three kind of principal steps that we always focus on. In terms of the home energy grants, we generally have three streams for AHBs and homeowners to look at. So the individual grant program, people manage it themselves. You can take a measure by measure approach. We have the one-stop shop, which is a complete energy upgrade solution via one expert service provider. And we have the community energy grants, which is the same. This presentation will focus mainly on the two latter ones there highlighted in the red box, but I'm going to just cover individual energy upgrade grants for the benefits of that window and door grant and people understanding, oh God, how do I get this? What's the eligibility rule? Just so you know, as an AHB, that for the window and door grant, the grant will be better on the one-stop shop and the CEG side of the house to the order of 7K. The individual grant for window replacement is 4K, but sometimes you may only need one measure. You've done other stuff, so maybe the individual route is for you because you won't get that uplift or that B2. So in terms of the individual approach, how are you eligible for the window and door grant? So the property needs to be built before 2011. We say the walls and the roof need to be in good condition. And what we say is on the BER report that they have a tag of good. Okay, so your BR assessor will tell you that straight away. And the reason we're saying that is we want people to have good wall insulation and good roof insulation before they start thinking of spending their money on the roof, on the windows, sorry. And then you're replacing your inefficient single glazed or double glazed windows with high performance windows to a U value of 1.4 or better. So that's just a key. We get asked this all the time, how to become eligible for the window and door grant. So I just wanted to emphasize that is the eligibility requirement if you're going down the individual route and you only want to get windows and doors upgraded on your properties. In terms of the one-stop shop, which we're getting a lot of AHB applications via the one-stop shop, because thankfully they're taking a whole house approach and making the home as efficiently as possible in one go. So we devised the one-stop shop in 2022, and it's for homeowners, approved housing bodies, and landlords carrying out a complete home energy upgrade in one go. And what we mean by that, you're bringing the property to a B rated, and you have an uplift of 100 on your B, or you're installing a heat pump. Okay. The one-stop shop manages the whole entire process from end to finish. So especially the smaller AHBs, if they don't know where to go, how do I coordinate the measures? What comes first? What's a good cost, and so forth? The one-stop shop will manage that from grant application all the way to your postworks BER. They offer a wider range of grants. So we've seen that on the list above. The wider range of grants on the one-stop shop. So all those measures on the left-hand side are grant supported, and it's the same on CEG. So you're getting ventilation, so mechanical ventilation, heat recovery, air tightness, floor insulation. There's a PM and home energy assessment. So there's a wider range of grants at higher grant values. You're also getting the cost of the grant deducted up front, which is huge from the affordability perspective. So say, for example, your grant comes to 20K and the works cost 40K, that 20K comes off the top. So you're only trying to find the 20K balance. So that makes that bit more affordable. And as I said, the one-stop shop manages from start to finish. The properties need to be 2011 or older. And the reason why we set 2011 is because the building regs control the standards after that, and the insulation is at a relatively good standard after 2011. You must hit a B rating at the end, and you can get all the information from the website in terms of our 32 one-stop shops, and they'd love to talk to AHBs. In terms of where we find it on the website, I just put a link there on the bottom right, and you can go where you are in the country and you'll get a list of one-stop shops. The 32 will pop up below you there. So that's just the link. And in terms of, suppose, what these one-stop shops have gone through to register, they've gone through a fairly robust registration process. So if you looked at their finances, their quality assurance, their growth plans, the competency of their resources, how they manage risk and their goals. So they've been pulled through kind of a really rigorous registration process. So that should give you confidence to talk to them and lean on them for support and the process. In terms of the grants, you're probably familiar with the grant tables. I put the grants link at the bottom there, just to hone in on the heat pump grant for one of them. So 6.5K for a heat pump grant. There's a renewable heat bonus, 6K, so you're taking out an oil or gas boiler. So that's 12.5K. And then we give you 2K to help you upgrade your RADs if needs be. So I think that comes to a total of 14.5K. So significant grant support there for heat pumps, external wall insulation 10K, detached windows 7K. And just the box in grey on the right-hand side, you'll see the improvements up to 6K for the bonus, where the grants were improved since May. And so on. Just touching on the traditional homes pilot via the one-stop shop program, and we're running a traditional homes pilot where we're upgrading 250 older homes. And what I mean by that is typically built before 1940, solid wall construction that needs to be just looked at in a different way. And we've applied flexibilities there. So if you have housing stock that you want to get them more energy efficient, we have a traditional homes pilot program, and it's done through a one-stop shop panel. They need to bring on board a traditional building professional, be it a chartered engineer or conservation architect, to help advise on a safe specification. So just I have a link there for you to get information on that. So there's an avenue there in terms of that older housing stock. In terms of the second panel, the second route is the Community Energy Grants Programme. This has been ongoing 12, 13 years now. And in its essence, what it's trying to do is bring together projects from a defined area, be it private sector projects, homes, charities, sports complexes, and so forth, and offer one entity a lump sum grant money to upgrade those dwellings. It's open for approved housing bodies, community groups, homeowners, public and private sector, and profits. Like everything else, it's focusing on insulation and heating upgrades, renewable technology and energy efficiency technologies. And the aim is obviously to reduce emissions. The key thing about this is it can be seen as a complex approach, but we have an excellent list of project coordinators on our website. I'd encourage you to link in with them because they're very, very au fait with the new how the program has evolved and how you can maximize your grant funding as an AHB. And we have a domestic only strand, so it removes a huge element of complexity. In terms of how to apply for this, it's done via the project coordinator. Okay, so that takes all that application process off yourself. We have brought the application dates into cycles. So previously, if anyone's familiar with the CEG program, you could apply in April, you had to finish works in October, and then it was dead for the rest of the time. We've brought applications in on the 22nd of every month for mud applications and on the 29th of every month for domestic only applications. So you can plan ahead, and then you have a 12-month delivery time frame with a minimum of 10 homes in an application. And the applications, I suppose, are scored, like every project has to be scored before we award grant money, on experience, the quality of resources, how you're going to manage the project in terms of risk and delivery, and the overall quality of a whole house retrofit. So stuff you've heard of before and probably are in your mind in terms of what constitutes a successful project in terms of delivery. In terms of the funding levels, for domestic only applications through the CEG route, which the project coordinator will apply for you and guide you, they're the same as the AHB on the one-stop shop. So the grants are the same. And I'd encourage you, and I'll have a slide on it, just 2 or 3 slides at the end, on the energy credits that can be availed through the obligated parties. There's really good credits there and cent per kilowatt hours that can be agreed, especially for fuel poor homes once it meets that eligibility criteria. So I'd link in with your project coordinators and obligated parties to avail of that. It could be up to 10% of the cost of the retrofit works. We also have the CEG program also has the mud application route where you've a complex of apartments, say, and they give grants of up to 75%, which is somewhat akin to the fixed AHB grants. We set them at 75%, but they can account for the common areas in a lot of these multi-unit developments, scaffolding costs, communal heating systems. So it has that element of flexibility there. So it's another really good route to look into if you're an AHB with complexes or apartment complexes around the country. Then we have an innovation delivery strand where we look for projects, say area-based projects where a local authority may have 25 homes in an estate and there might be 8 private homes in an estate, and we apply flexibility where we can upgrade that estate in one go to generate economies of scale and new ways of delivering energy efficiency in an area-based approach. So that's another really good avenue for people to look into. Last 2 slides. I just did a quick table on the difference between CEG and one-stop shop. I won't go through it bit by bit. I'll go through 3 or 4 of the top ones. So we all know the one-stop shop looks for a B rated and an uplift, or a B rated and a heat pump. That's the same across the 2 programs. Whole house approach, that's the same across the 2 programs. On the one-stop shop, an application can be made via portal on a house-by-house basis. On the CEG grant on the right-hand side, it has to be done as part of a group or a batch, and it's formed into an application of a minimum of 10, and then you have to wait a bit for that application to be approved. On the one-stop shop on the left-hand side there, the 5th bullet point down, the letter of offer for that house is instant. Okay, so you can start work straight away. On the CEG, you get a group approval, so you have to wait for that to be approved, and then you can start on your 10 or more houses. The one-stop shop is obliged to manage the process from end to end, from information all the way to sign off. In terms of the CEG, a project coordinator is appointed, and there's other third parties, so it mightn't be as clear cut. The one-stop shop is designed to is obliged to deduct the grant off up front, so that's the eligibility, that's the affordability side. Whereas in the CEG, a lot of times it's paid through milestone payments, so you're waiting for money, and the grant isn't deducted up front. So this will be circulated. You can have a look through the differences there in your own time, so people get an idea of what is the difference between the 2. And the last slide I have is just on the obligated party. So main energy suppliers and distributors in the country are obliged to meet energy efficiency targets annually. So that means a lot of them engage with retrofit companies to try and support them in terms of the technical side and the finance side so they can claim the savings against their targets. And they'll set a cent per kilowatt hour rate for the works that are completed, and that will come off the cost. So it makes it more affordable. Stuff they can do is they can provide quality assurance processes. They can support you in the tender evaluation process, provide technical support such as property surveys, BERs, HLIs, thermal bridge assessments. They can do PM and coordinate services and so forth. So I would urge people to link up with the main obligated parties, the energy providers, to see how you can maximize that support. Information is on the link there below, and there's a few good case studies at that link to show you how other parties have availed of that and what has came off the overall bill due to it. So that's just myself, Paul. I hope I didn't go on too long.
No, it's perfect. Thanks a million. As I said, there's a lot of questions, probably quite specific questions coming in on various applications for retrofit. So if we don't get to address them, I will be sending them on to various participants who will be able to address them. So as I say, so we may not get the chance either to answer them now, but we will come back to them. One thing that Stephen was speaking about was MUD, so multi-unit developments in there. I've put a link in the chat. The very first comment there will show you there's various links, but there's some really great webinar material that the housing agency has done with SEAI. So really worth looking at, very informative. And if you have any questions along that, don't hesitate to contact either SEAI or the housing agency on that. Thanks, Stephen. Really appreciate that. We're going to move on to Georgina now. Georgina, if you'd like to share your presentation. Thanks, Stephen.
Sure. Thanks, Paul.
Okay.
Now let me know when you can see it in presenter mode. Can you see my screen okay?
I can, but it's in like a display
Notes.
setting there in your notes.
Yeah.
Okay. That is better, is it?
There you go. Lovely stuff.
Great.
That's great, Georgina.
All right. Thanks everyone, and thanks for the invite, Paul and Hayley and Alison in the housing agency. On a personal note, I went through the One Stop Shop grant program on my own home recently, and you know, I can say that I had a really good experience doing a deep retrofit through the grant program there. So thanks, Stephen and the team.
No
so
problem.
yeah, the future of buildings. I'm Georgina Molloy is my name. I'm the program manager for Energy Performance of Buildings Directive Concerted Action. It's a bit of a mouthful, but basically I work on the EU directive, mostly at EU level. So sharing knowledge and experience with the other member states who also have to put these requirements under the directive into their laws, and just learning from the other member states to see how we can do things better based on what they do, and sharing our experience with them as well. So I'll talk a bit about the new BER that we introduced in May, the Building Renovation Passport, the life cycle global warming potential, solar energy in buildings, and sustainable mobility, so around EV charging. I'll focus mostly on homes because I know that's what we're here to talk about today. There is lots around non-domestic or non-residential buildings, which you might be interested in. So I'm very happy for people to contact me separately, because we won't have time to cover everything today, but I know there might be separate things you'd like to talk about. So the overarching aim of the Energy Performance of Buildings Directive is that all buildings in Europe would be zero emission buildings by 2050. And I'll talk about what a zero emission building is, because that's, you know, the future of our homes and our buildings. The European Commission do acknowledge that many buildings won't be able to achieve zero emission building status, mostly because of the historical nature of them. And Stephen talked about the traditional building pilot programme, which is, you know, might not be appropriate to bring it all the way to zero emission building, but we can do things with those buildings and get them as good as possible. So the directive was formally adopted at EU level 2 years ago. The deadline for putting the directive into Irish law and member state law was May of this year. And then further deadlines are coming in further years, and I'll talk about them in a minute. So some of the legislation that we do have in Ireland at the moment, and government departments are working on further legislation, but the first one that we introduced was that there's no financial incentives for fossil fuel boilers. So I did see a question in the chat there about gas boilers, and we're not allowed to incentivize fossil fuel boilers at the moment. So the likes of our Warmer Home scheme have pivoted to comply with that. BACS, which is building automation and control systems, are required in certain non-residential buildings. And then we've a new BER and the introduction of a new standard for buildings near a zero emission building. So if a building, now I know we're talking about homes here, but some of you maybe own offices or you may be renting offices. If the HVAC system, so the heating, ventilation and cooling system, is above 290 kilowatts, BACS are required. We have some guidance documents and some compliance sheets on our website, so you can go to those links there and have a look to see how you check if you might need to comply with this, or maybe your landlord or your building agent might need to have a look at it. So some of the high level impacts then on buildings coming in the future: zero emission buildings, the introduction of renovation passports. I'll talk about that in a minute. Digital building logbooks and the requirement to share more data with more stakeholders than we have in the past. So can I move this out of the way? More requirements to get a BER, the requirement to have solar on our buildings, EV charging infrastructure, smart readiness of buildings, calculating the embodied carbon, which I'll talk about in a minute. Looking at the indoor environmental quality, really important, like Stephen was talking about, deep retrofits, that we're not negatively impacting the indoor quality of our buildings. A particular interest probably to yourselves is the requirement to improve the average energy performance of the residential building stock. So that's on the state to make sure that we improve the energy performance across the whole stock. There's no requirement for individual houses to improve, but that all houses can contribute something to the building stock. And then for non-residential, the requirement that the worst performing non-residential buildings would be improved. And then the new BER, which came into being in May of this year. So many of you, or you'll all know the old CERT. So we had the rating, the dweller and assessor details, and then showing where the building sits on the scale. And many of all the grant programs use this as a baseline for assessing where buildings are at and where they should go to, and the carbon emission indicator as well. So really important to say that the old CERT remains valid for its 10-year validity period unless something changes in the building. So no need to run out and get a new BER for no reason. It'll stay valid unless you do something to your building. In terms of who will need to get a BER under the new directive, it'll be BERs or EPCs as they call them at EU level. Are required for new constructions, major renovations, which is new, sale, rent, or rental contract renewal, and EPCs or BERs should be issued for existing buildings owned or occupied by public bodies, which is probably of interest to yourselves if you're in offices. So that's a new requirement, and government departments are working on putting this into legislation at the moment. So looking at the new CERT then, it's 3 pages, focusing in on the front page. We have the class. So this one is the best class. It's an A0, which is a zero emission building. We have the dwelling and the assessor information, the indicators that the directive told us we needed to put on the front page, and they were quite prescriptive. And then we have a QR code to check the validity and the recency of the CERT. You might have a paper copy, but if you scan this, you might find actually it's been updated since you first, someone gave you this cert first. So that's the new front page. And then the second page and the third page have things like the energy carrier, the renewable energy sources, the links to grant programs, and the signature of the BER assessor to give more validity to the cert. What is an A0 then? Because that's a new class and that's a zero emission building. This is the figures for homes, residential buildings. So if the building has 42 kilowatt hours per meter squared per year primary energy or better, it could be classed as a zero emission building. It needs a carbon equivalent emissions value of 5 kilograms of CO2 equivalent per meter squared per year. No fossil fuels on site. The energy used should be met with carbon-free sources that comply with national criteria, and that is in the BER methodology. We've made that update. The building should have the capacity to react to external signals and adjust energy consumption, and it should be NZEB compliant. So we can't have a zero emission building that doesn't also comply with the current building regs, which is NZEB. So government departments are working on legislation. Legislation actually is brought in May for defining a ZEB and the new BER, but they'll be working on building regulations in the coming months and years. So looking at dates then, by the end of 2027, new buildings owned by public bodies should be zero emission building. And by 2030, all new buildings, homes and non-residential, should be zero emission buildings. And where public bodies intend to occupy a new building that they don't own, they should aim for it to be a ZEB. So just comparing the two scales then, the A, Bs and Cs track nicely from one to the other. So if you had an A2 before, it'll now be an A whenever you decide that you need a new BER. The D, E, F and G don't track exactly onto each other because we had to put a certain amount of buildings into G, and that changed the other letters. And then of course the ZEB criteria on the right. Moving on to renovation passports then, this is a stepped guidance that shows you how you would get, for example, in this one, your G building in a series of steps to being a zero emission building. So it sets out the steps, and in particular, probably it's useful for the people going the individual route. Individual grant route, because you might want to plan out, okay, I'll do step 1, 2 and 3 now, but then we don't have the finance to do the rest of the steps till later. And as Stephen was saying, you really want to make sure that you do things in the right sequence, that you're not doing something that you have to rip out later because you should have maybe waited to do your solar panels last because they're the last thing that's easiest to install. It just depends on the building and it's very specific to the building. So the BER assessors are the people who will train, if they want to become experts to carry out the building renovation passport. And some of them have already done that training. Moving on then, I know we're lacking time here, so we'll moving on to the life cycle global warming potential. It's about the embodied emissions in the building materials over its full life cycle, the construction process, during the operation of the building, and during the end of life of the building. So a full life cycle assessment. Looking at dates then, by the end of 2026, countries are supposed to set limit values. So what would the limit be on this calculation? By the end of 2027, all new buildings greater than 1,000 square meters should calculate the GWP. And by 2030, all buildings should calculate the global warming potential and be under the limit set. So government departments, along with SEAI, are working on this at the moment. Last two slides then, I want to talk very briefly about solar and focusing in there on residential. All new residential buildings should install a suitable solar installation by 2030, and government departments are working to define what a suitable solar installation is and working with other member states to define that. And focusing on the residential part of EV charging, there are requirements there for residential buildings with more than 3 parking spaces, new or major renovations, to install pre-cabling and ducting and bicycle parking. And just to say that that's not individual homes that would have space for 3 cars. That's like your apartment block that would have more than 3 spaces. And then for new residential buildings, the requirement is to install 1 charging point. So that's the end of my presentation. Happy to take any questions, and thanks so much for your attention.